Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Friday, the 15th of June, 2012. I'm Jim Nintzel, host of Political Roundtable, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national politics. Tonight on the Roundtable, we'll examine how the dust settled in the wake of Democrat Ron Barber's victory over Republican Jesse Kelly in this week's special congressional election, and look at whether Mr. Barber can hang on to the seat in November. We'll also catch up with the latest in downtown Tucson politics and talk about redistricting. Joining me this evening is Democratic Party Chairman Jeff Rogers, Tucson Tea Party founder Trent Humphries, and former Republican lawmaker Pete Hershberger. Welcome to all of you. Before we get started, though, Congressman Raul Grijalva stopped by Arizona Illustrated earlier today to talk about President Obama's recent change in immigration policy. Earlier today, the Obama administration announced a new immigration policy regarding young people who have been brought to the United States without going through the proper immigration channels. Under the directive, individuals will be eligible for deferred enforcement action if they meet certain criteria. They must have come to the United States under the age of 16. They must have continuously resided in the United States for at least 5 years and be here now. They must be in school, have graduated from high school, have a GED, or be honorably discharged veterans of the armed forces, and they can't have a criminal record, and they must be 30 or younger. Joining me now in the studio is Congressman Raul Grijalva to discuss the new policy. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're pleased with the administration's announcement?
Terribly pleased. And I think the president reached a conclusion that the gridlock on this issue, specifically the DREAM Act in Congress and the resistance on the part of the Republican majority in the House and not able to get 60 votes in the Senate and Romney promising to veto it if he's elected president, I think he was left with few options. And his decision, broad, and we applaud it. I really think that he took a political risk, some political capital being utilized here. I respect that very much. In the heat of a presidential race, you want to minimize your hits, and I think for those students, hundreds of thousands, it is a welcome relief to them and their families, and significantly is going to alter their lives, and I think in the long term be of great benefit to the rest of us.
Critics, of course, are going to say this is a backdoor amnesty. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I heard Brewer right after that, the governor, say that. I heard McCain in his press release say the same thing, and others. Here's the problem with this issue. The people that are harping about backdoor amnesty, rule of law, due process, are the same individuals, those two included, that'll fight tooth and nail to keep Congress from passing anything that approaches the DREAM Act in Congress. And so you can't speak out of both sides of your mouth. You can't be a hypocrite. I think the president was left with this decision as commander-in-chief because for the last two election cycles, people have been able to beat the drum of immigration, make immigrants the boogeyman in every election, and beat the drum on these young people. Well, I think that's beginning to sour. And I think when the American people see the faces of these young people coming out of the shadows, that argument is going to be put to rest.
And as you said, the DREAM Act has stalled. Other immigration reform has stalled. What do you think it would take in Washington to actually move forward with
It's going to take the American people. And I think the president has given us a great contribution here. He has broken the ice on the issue of moving forward on immigration reform, taking the DREAM Act and enacting it by executive order. Hopefully the American people will begin to look at the need for consensus and compromise on this issue. To merely say no is not going to solve this problem. To harp about the border must be secure when there is no one able to quantify how that becomes secure, I think just breeds the kind of political division we have in this state and in the country. And it also breeds the insecurity about if we don't reform this law, it doesn't help our security, and it's certainly not helping our economy.
Let me ask you a little bit about Latino politics in general. We know from polling data that Latinos are certainly moving into the Democratic column, and George W. Bush had some success in capturing them, but they seem to be moving much more towards the supporting Obama. But at the same time, certainly here in Arizona, we've seen talk that the Latino electorate is a sleeping giant, that it doesn't vote at the same rate as other ethnic groups. Why is it that we don't see more Latino participation in politics?
The malaise can be explained in many ways, and those of us that have been involved in community life and politics for as long as I have, it's a puzzle that's sometimes hard to solve. I think sometimes it's just disappointment. I think sometimes it's a lack of progress. And sometimes I think it's an ethic. I'm going to take care of my family, put that first, because the rest of it doesn't affect me. But I think this whole issue with immigration, 1070, pulled at the heart on a very, very personal level. Voting's about it's a personal issue as much as anything else. And I see the numbers this election cycle to be huge, and this action by the president will help that because you have to defend the decision he made, and 1070 is going to help. But I think overall, it is going to take that ethic of voting becoming more and more part of our culture. I think it's getting there. Is it where it should be proportionally? Do we have the influence politically we should? No. But I think this next election cycle is going to push us a lot further in that direction than we've been.
So you think this is the year the sleeping giant awaits?
Absolutely. It's a defining moment. It's a defining moment for the nation. I think Latino voters are smart. They know it's defining. And they know that they are going to play a role in deciding who's president, who's congressman, who's city councilman, who's school board member. They know that. And this issue around 1070, ethnic studies, the whole issue around the DREAM Act, even if you're a fifth-generation Latino here in Tucson, Arizona, it's personal. Okay. Because your credibility is being brought under fire. And I think that's the motivation.
Okay, I think we'll leave it right there. But again, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Well, as always.
Trent, Congressman Grijalva is very happy with this new policy that the president has formulated here. What's your thoughts?
Well, this isn't something you should do with the executive order. I mean, this should be worked through the Congress, and it should be bipartisan. And even when they had the chance to do it without bipartisan, when they had majorities in both the House and the Senate and a supermajority in the Senate, the president did nothing. They introduced a bill that even all the Democrats wouldn't vote for. The president has a job as a president to actually work with Congress and work with the people to come up with something that'll work for everybody and not just make imperial decrees, which he tends to do quite often, and it polarizes politics, and it's sad.
Jeff?
This is long overdue. He should have done it sooner, in my opinion, and I applaud him for doing it now. If you'll remember, back in late 2010, the DREAM Act passed the House. The votes were there in the Senate, but the obstructionists in the Republican Party beat it down, and as they've created a situation where you have to have a supermajority all of the time in the Senate, and I think it was a wonderful thing that he did. After all, even here in Arizona, which has some of the toughest immigration stances in the nation, I think the latest polling was in April on this, and 73% of Arizonans support it. 59% of Republicans in Arizona support the DREAM Act. So this is something that's long overdue, and I applaud him for getting it done today.
And Pete, immigration, obviously a hot-button issue, particularly in Republican politics, and a lot of Republicans choose to take a hard line on immigration for fear of what might happen in a primary if they don't.
Right. I think it was the right thing for the president to do, a courageous move. Here in Arizona, it's a very hot-button issue, and it wouldn't get passed in Arizona as it wouldn't get passed with the stagnation in Congress right now. And so the president took a very courageous move.
So acting unilaterally and bypassing Congress, that's courage. Many people call that unconstitutional. I think we'll find out later that it is. Just like the two decisions are going to come down next week, where the president's going to be found unconstitutional, both of them.
But for the president and his secretary, Napolitano, have the leeway to do this. This is not permanent. It's a 2-year window of opportunity, and it could be extended course, we know that if Romney is elected, he'll withdraw this presidential order, and he says he will veto a DREAM Act even if it does pass Congress. So there's a stark difference between the candidates, and this is just one area in which it's apparent.
I'm sure we'll be talking about immigration a lot over the next few months, but let's talk about the election. On Tuesday night, Southern Arizona voters decided that Democrat Ron Barber would complete Gabrielle Giffords' congressional term. Mr. Barber beat Republican Jesse Kelly by 7 percentage points. The race was made necessary when Giffords stepped down in January to focus on her recovery from a Tucson shooting spree that left 6 dead and 13 wounded. The special election pitted Giffords' former aide, Mr. Barber, against her former political nemesis, Mr. Kelly. On election night, here's what Ron Barber had to say.
This was never Gabby's seat. It's not my seat. It's your seat. This seat belongs to the people of Southern Arizona. Thank you all for entrusting me with it. I promise you, I will work every bit as hard as Mo Udall, as Jim Colby, and as Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords to honor that trust.
Jeff, were you surprised by the margin here? A lot of people were anticipating a close race. It ended up being a 7-point margin of victory.
A little bit. I was predicting around a 5-point margin, and so I was surprised to see it spread up to 7. But if you remove the parts of the district that will no longer be in the new District 2, that is Saddlebrook, Marana, and Oro Valley, then the victory margin actually goes up to 9+ points. So this is a very, very big victory for Ron Barber. And I think it's also, I hope that it sends a message to the Republican Party that they can't trot out these extremists any longer and win a moderate district like this. And so maybe this is a victory for all kinds of moderates and independents, moderate Democrats, and moderate Republicans, so that we can see that extremism on neither side is going to win many of these districts. And I'm very pleased to see that.
And Trent, you supported a different candidate in the primary, but did support Jesse Kelly in the general election here. Were you surprised by the margin of victory, and were you surprised when Jesse Kelly said he probably would not be seeking this seat in the fall?
Well, I think that we all knew that Ron Barber had significant advantage going into this race, with the circumstances and everything else going on like that. And I think that Jesse acquitted himself well, and I think that he did make the right decision in giving somebody else a chance to run for that seat going forward.
And Pete, you crossed party lines to support Ron Barber and said that you thought that Jesse was an ideological bomb thrower. Is this an example of what happens when you nominate somebody who's too far to the fringes and you lose the moderate voters?
Absolutely. And yet, if you look at District 8 over the last 4 elections, in 2006, Gabrielle Giffords beat a bad Republican candidate, Grandy Graff. In 2008, she beat a good Republican candidate, Tim B. In 2010, that was the anomaly, when she only won by 4,000 votes. That was the Tea Party moment in the sunshine, which I believe is gone. Again, in 2012, Ron Barber beat a bad Republican candidate, Jesse Kelly. In each instance, about the same margin. If you look at the 7% advantage and the 5% swing of registration, that's a 12% swing. So those are significant wins by the Democrat in 3 of those 4 elections. Going forward, I think that speaks very well for a moderate centrist Democrat, whether it's Gabrielle Giffords or Ron Barber.
Just going forward, I think if Mr. Hershberger is expecting the Tea Party to go away and be done, I think he's going to be in for quite a few more months of disappointment.
And Jeff, there's dust is still settling here, but Ron Barber will be seeking re-election in a district that, as you pointed out, is more friendly to Democrats, but he does face a primary from State Representative Matt Hines. How does that shape up?
Well, I think a lot of Matt Hines. He did a wonderful job in the state legislature. He's a very smart young man, and I think he's a rising star in the Democratic Party, but I don't think this is his moment. I don't think this is his time. I'm kind of hoping he'll wake up and smell the coffee and realize that his moment is maybe in 2 more years or something like that. But if he does go forward, I don't think there's going to be a tremendous amount of support for him after this really, really good win by Barber. I mean, this is a stunning win if you look at the 9 points in the new district. And then when you look at the other parts of the district that are going to be added into it, they were strongly strongly Democrat, even went for Obama by, I think, a 2/3 margin. So so this district is going to look pretty darn good for Democrats and pretty darn good for Ron Barber.
And Trent, the general election will pit the winner of that Democratic primary against Martha McSally. None of us knew who Martha McSally was, I think, until earlier this year when she got into that primary in the special election and came in second to Jesse Kelly. She got about 1/4 of the vote, has an impressive resume as a former combat pilot in the Air Force. She's known for having sued the Pentagon over some issues about what she had to wear in Saudi Arabia. What's your impression of McSally, and how do you see this race shaping up?
Well, the thing that really surprised me about Martha McSally is her ability to raise money. She does a very good job of raising money. In fact, Matt Hines has raised $100,000. So I think when he said there's no support out there for him, I think that belies the fact that he's raising money as well. Martha has a tough road, because it's really hard to throw somebody in office when they've only been in there, 4 months or 4 or 5 months. So I think that, it's going to be tough. I think that she does bring a different message. I think she brings a different audience. And I think that she brings a different argument. I think that Ron Barber really didn't put himself out there that much during this election cycle. I think that he's going to have to take a few votes also. So I think we're going to know more about what he says he's going to vote for and how he's going to vote and what the reality of it is too. Because once you start having a record, the rhetoric that you have around you and the things you'll be able to say about yourself kind of fade away a little bit more. So he'll have to take a few votes, and we'll kind of know where he is on more issues. And I think that we'll have to see if he is the centrist he says he is, or if he's the far left liberal that he was before this election. And if he proves to be that, then I think he will have problems.
And Pete, do you think Martha McSally is more palatable to Republican voters and independents than Jesse Kelly was?
Certainly, almost anybody would be. But the momentum behind Ron Barber is pretty tremendous right now. And regardless of who the Republicans put up, I think it's Ron Barber's election.
Yeah, and as you followed, as I did, very closely the Republicans' primary debates, and as I watched those debates, I didn't see a dime's difference in all of those candidates when it came down to policy positions. So she may be a better packaged and sort of softer, more gentle version of those same policies, but I don't see where she differed too awfully much with Jesse Kelly, except on some of his crazy statements about energy independence.
And Trent, what about the NRCC and these national groups? They didn't get much on their investment this last time. Do you think they'll be coming back to play in the fall and spending money?
Obviously, they're going to watch Poland, and they're going to take Poland, and they're going to see where things are going. There's a lot of races going on, and so I think they're going to pour money where they think they can get the most bang for their buck. And I think that the Republicans are going to have another strong cycle, just like they did 2 years ago. And I think we've already seen it with Wisconsin. That there's a lot of sentiment out there, and I think Mitt Romney, he's going to win this election. He's going to have large coattails, so we'll see where that leaves them and where their spending goes and how much money they raise. They're raising a tremendous amount of money. The Republicans Mitt Romney outraised Barack Obama last month by $17 million. So I think the money is going to be there. Now, where they spend it over here or not, that remains to be seen.
All right, and as long as we're talking about congressional races, part of the old CD8, the areas in Marana and Oro Valley and Saddlebrook are going into the new CD1, which is Southern Arizona's new congressional district, but it's not just Southern Arizona. It also goes up to Flagstaff. It covers a lot of eastern rural Arizona, the Hopi and Navajo reservations. We have Jonathan Payton running in the Republican primary there. Jonathan was on this program as a panelist, so Trent, maybe Congress is in your future as well. Jonathan has knocked one of his opponents off the ballot and has the 2 other opponents in that race. You see him coming through that Republican primary?
Oh, easily. He's the only one that can raise money. He's got the people in place. I have to make a special plug. My other Tea Party co-founder, Robert Meyer, is his campaign manager. Congratulations to Robert. He's doing a tremendous job, just like he did with the Tea Party.
And Jeff, on the Democratic side, you have former Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick running against a political newcomer, Winona Benally Baldonegro, and that race is shaping up. Winona has not raised a lot of money, but she's making a lot of noise and feeling like she's being mistreated by the Democratic Party.
Well, keep in mind this district has the second and third largest counties are Apache and Navajo counties. It's 20% Native American, it's 20% Hispanic. I think that Winona is working very hard in that district. She might surprise some people, but she is way out fundraised by Ann Kirkpatrick, more than 10 to 1. I mean, we're talking somebody's raised less than $100,000 versus somebody's raised over $1 million. So that plus her sort of pseudo-incumbency, having represented that area for 2 years before she lost the last election, probably gives her a strong leg up in the primary, and probably gives her a huge leg up over Jonathan Payton in the general election. I mean, you've got to realize that Jonathan Payton doesn't even live in that district, never has. Probably can't even find his way to Navajo County. So I think it strongly favors Kirkpatrick, and the polling that we've seen shows her way ahead by double digits over Payton. And I would suggest that being a payday loan lobbyist isn't going to sell any better in CD1 than it sold down here in Tucson.
Kirkpatrick's an interesting case, because the Indian reservation people do know her. She represented them, and yet they don't like her. They like her opponent in the primary. Because Rick Renzi did a tremendous job representing the reservations when he was representative, and Ann Kirkpatrick did a horrid job. That's why they threw her out of office. And I think that you're going to see that Jonathan Payton is going to, once people get to know him and they know what he's going to do and they see what he has plans, to help them out, I think you're going to see him do strongly in those areas, especially when we start adding in the northwest part of Tucson into his district. And the final thing I want to say about Ms. Kirkpatrick is that at the final months after she lost her last election, she actually brought her campaign staff into the office, paid them a $100,000 bonus for work that they didn't do as part of her staff, and then left office. So we're going to call her Kickback Kirkpatrick to go with your misnomer of payday Payton.
She still returned more of her, didn't use all of her salary allotted to her by the government.
Kickback's a kickback.
And Pete, this is an area that you used to represent in the state legislature.
Yes, the portion of Oro Valley was my District 26. I think that Ann Kirkpatrick has a tremendous advantage, and if she gets through the primary relatively unscathed, I think you'd look for her to win that seat. Jonathan, as a carpetbagger, does have a lot of baggage.
Okay. And with all of this talk about the new districts here, I thought we might revisit the redistricting controversy. Republicans were very unhappy about how the redistricting went, and the legislature has now filed a lawsuit challenging whether or not there's actual authority to create an independent redistricting commission. Pete, I saw you at some of these redistricting meetings. What was your sense of how that process went?
I think the process went as it was designed to go. I think the lawsuit by the Republican leadership is purely partisan. I think Andy Tobin in the House is trying to save his job as Speaker of the House. I think the commission followed the guidelines of the law to a T. Some of the interests are competing, but competition is designed to be one of the factors that are favored if it doesn't detract from one of the other provisions. And that's exactly what they did. I would like to remind people that this passed the Justice Department pre-clearance, whereas the one 10 years ago did not and had to be sent back to the legislature. So this is a frivolous lawsuit that unfortunately will cost the taxpayers of Arizona a great deal, money that we could be spending on health care, kids care for poor kids.
Trent, your thoughts on redistricting and the latest
look
lawsuits?
At District 1. It goes from Mexico to Utah. Something was broke in that process. That's not communities of interest. That there's just disparate groups that were thrown together as leftovers. There are problems in this process. I think that you can't look at that objectively and say that worked the way it was supposed to work. We also look, not one sitting representative was thrown into a district with another representative. There were games being played throughout that whole process. To say that politics was completely taken out of it, I think, is a misnomer. Politics played the entire thing in that thing.
Let me remind Trent that the District 1 that you're referring to as being large is smaller than District 1 currently is. Governor Brewer demanded that there be 2 rural districts. There are 2 rural districts. There are 5 districts within Maricopa County alone, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. That is compactness. Everywhere down the line, it meets the guidelines of the initiative.
Well, and I'm saying the initiative was flawed. If it created that, then the initiative was flawed.
I couldn't say it better than he did. I mean, but he's right on the numbers there. This is a waste of taxpayers' money, and there are 2 court decisions, one dating from 2010 in Florida and another one dating back to 1916 that says that the legislature or the state or the voters can invest in some other body to pick the districting. So it's a completely waste of time, taxpayer dollars.
If you want to look at a proper analysis of this, go to the Grand Canyon Institute website, grandcanyoninstitute.org, for a proper analysis, point by point. An excellent description and analysis of this process.
And this is Grand Canyon Institute is a think tank that you're on the board of.
Yes, it's an independent, bipartisan, nonpartisan, think tank that's new and quite frankly, very exciting. Very different from the Goldwater Institute that is a political shill for ALEC, Arizona Legislative Exchange Commission, that's caused so much controversy lately. For good analysis and research, the Grand Canyon Institute will provide it for you.
Okay, and we've got about a minute left, and I did want to get to the Rio Nuevo story this week. We talked about it a little bit last week, but this week they had their first board meeting with the new board members, and Alberto Moore, one of the holdovers on the board, gave quite an impassioned 45-minute speech. And Trent, what was your thoughts on what's going on
This meeting
here?
was called on Election Tuesday during the middle of the day. They didn't want participation in that meeting. They didn't want the public to see what was going on. Fortunately, a lot of people showed up, and I think they derailed the process that was going on. The most interesting thing that happened in that meeting was admission by the city that there was no money in that account. There's no money in that account. So why are we talking about spending $10 million if there's no money in the account? And quite frankly, I'm very disappointed in Steve Kozachek for not stepping up and knowing what was in that account. And just being a leader on this. I think that he realizes that a lot of the waste and mismanagement that happened under Nina Trasoff is happening with people that he represents now in his district. And he doesn't want their names coming forward, too. So Steve needs to step up and be a leader again.
All right, 10 seconds here,
The
Jeff.
truth of the matter is that this Alberto Moore and Jeff Hill, former state legislator, are both real conspiracy theorists. I mean, I expect them to show up at the next meeting wearing tinfoil hats and talking about black helicopters.
The next meeting will happen at midnight.
We're going to have to leave it there. It's all the time we have time for, but you can learn more about what's happening in politics by visiting azpm.org/yourvote. And while you're on our website, we'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's program, so be sure to leave us a comment. To find out the latest on AZPM, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Stay tuned next for the News Hour, and then at 8:30, tune into Arizona Week for an in-depth look at the dangers of wildfire season. On Monday, Arizona Illustrated looks at the future of the state's clean elections program. I'm Jim Nintzel. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.